Hey there, art nerds. I've got another easy watercolor tutorial for you guys today. Today we're painting a postcard, and we are painting a wildflower postcard. And while this looks complicated, it's a lot easier than it looks, and I'm looking forward to walking you guys through the process today. So here are the materials that you'll need to get started. I'm working with gatorboard as a support. I have a scrap of cotton rag watercolor paper. I have some MT washi masking tape. I've got a couple of ceramic palettes. One's actually a sauce dish. The other is just a small heart-shaped plate. I've got a selection of some of my favorite watercolor brushes, and I've got my Daily Driver watercolor palette, as well as a paper towel and a cup of clean water. So you don't need a whole lot to do this, and you certainly don't need to work with a palette as large as this. This is just my regular watercolor palette, but your standard 12 color palette should have plenty of color for what we're going to be doing today. If you're interested in a good, smaller watercolor palette, I really recommend the Core Mini palette as well as the DaVinci Mixing palette. I've reviewed both of those here on the channel, and I've used them extensively here on the channel. Honestly, I would be using them today, but I loaned them to my local library for part of their display. So one of the first things we're going to do is we are going to secure our cotton rag quote-unquote postcard. If you'd like to mail it, I would recommend cutting it to a more standard size than this. I'm just trying to kind of bust my stash of scraps. We're going to tape our postcard down to our support. Now, you don't have to use gatorboard. This is the same stuff that they make political signs out of. You can use the chipboard from the back of a sketchbook, or you can even use cardboard. We just need something that's going to provide some support to our watercolor paper as we add water to it. And I'm going to prop this up just a little bit. I'm using a masking fluid for a skip, but frankly, you could use a book, you could use whatever. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create our background toning wash so that we have the implication, it gives the impression of a bright sunny day. And I'm starting with a warmer yellow for this. And then I'm going to mix in a little bit of ultramarine blue so that we get a beautiful kind of graduated fade. So we're letting gravity and water do the majority of the work. This is why we propped up our board. And this is very simple. If you don't get it perfect, that's totally fine. We're going to be painting on top of this anyway. It's really just kind of setting the stage for the illustration that we're going to be painting later. Adding another layer of a warmer yellow up at the top just so that we get kind of that sunlight feel and to encourage a little bit of blending. And then we're going to let this dry fully before we move on to the next stage. Now, if you're in a painting hurry, if you have limited time, you can use a hairdryer to help speed things up, but I actually use a dehumidifier to help because I find that it doesn't apply heat to my watercolor illustration and it just kind of encourages more even drying. So we're going to start with a warm bright yellow, and I'm painting in some background grasses. These are kind of like the furthermost grasses, but they're the ones that are kind of caught the most by the sunlight. They're the ones that are a little bit taller and they're catching the sun. And I'm just using a really simple sort of flicking motion to kind of capture this grass-like appearance. Now, I want to point out before we get too far in that I am actually referencing wildflowers while I'm painting this. So I recommend you do the same thing, and that'll give you kind of a more realistic approach. Now, I am so sorry that my brush cap is so in the way of the camera, but as you guys can see, I'm using a little bit of olive green to paint some of the grasses that are a little bit closer to us, the viewer, and that are a little bit lower down in the picture frame. So what we're doing right now is we are building up kind of layers of color and layers of grasses to make this appear a little bit more complicated. Now, we're actually kind of doing the opposite of what I would normally recommend if we were painting atmospheric perspective. Generally, I would say we paint our background things with a cooler color and we warm them up as we come into the foreground, but this is more meant to be evocative. And so now I'm working with a warmer yellow orange. And I'm painting kind of very simple petal shapes. I'm very loose with it. I'm mostly relying on the brush to do the majority of the work. And I'm painting just kind of like goldenrods, or maybe they might be marigolds. And I'm only using a few brush strokes for this. So generally, none of these little flowers get more than 5 brush strokes. And here and there, I'm going to mix in a little bit of Indian yellow, just kind of further back to imply the same flower a little further back, or to imply petals that are a little further back on the flower. So the key to today's tutorial is we're not getting complicated with any of this. We're sticking to really simple forms. We're sticking to just silhouettes of the flower in color, basically. So I've grabbed some of my ultramarine blue, and in my reference photo, there were these smaller blue flowers popping up, adding little pops of color here and there. So I am using my ultramarine blue and kind of doing like a pom-pom motion to paint these. And I also, since I want it to look like some of these are behind some of the grasses, I'm painting some of them around the grasses. So in a lot of our other easy watercolor tutorials, we used a lot of masking fluid. That is a great technique to have. Today we're going more freeform. So I've grabbed a mauve color and I'm painting these little 5 petaled cone flowers, leaving the centers open because we're going to add a dab of yellow once that's had a chance to dry. Then I'm going in with this brilliant pink. You could use a magenta for this as well, to start painting in some of the poppies that are in the background. And these are also 5 petaled flowers, and I am really relying on my brush work for this. So rather than drawing it in, I'm kind of just mushing the brush around to like get those larger leaves, those larger petals. So this is a great exercise for practicing your observation skills, but it's also a great way to create a small original piece of art that you can send to somebody you love. And mailing original art postcards through the mail is fairly easy. You just put it in a clear plastic bag and you put your stamps on the outside and you address it on the inside, and it's ready to go. So I grabbed a little bit of scarlet red to start painting in some of my darker poppies. And then while things are still a little bit wet, I sprinkled on some yellows and I sprinkled on some mauves, just kind of tapping the watercolor brush as I go. And that's just going to kind of loosen things up. That's going to kind of liven it up and kind of imply that there are some smaller flowers in the background. So once things have had a chance to dry a little bit, I'm going in and using a little bit of black for the center of the poppies. And while that's drying, I'm going in with some white gouache, and I would recommend working a little thicker than I'm working. And I'm painting these teeny tiny little white flowers, which honestly add so much vibrancy to this illustration. They really liven it up. So this could be a fun one to pull out some gouache and get some more opaque colors and get some more color pops in there. The gouache might be perfect for adding in like really intense reds or really intense mauves that aren't as transparent as you would get with watercolor. So these are little 4-petaled flowers. Sometimes I'm doing 5 petals, and they have little heart-shaped petals. So this is also a great exercise for really understanding and simplifying flowers. I know we talk about flowers a lot here on the channel. It's because I love them and I love drawing and painting them. I've got some more detailed flower drawing and painting tutorials. If you'd like to learn how to draw specific flowers, I've got you covered. And then in my upcoming how to draw, or maybe it's out by now, my how to draw anything class, the second class, I go really in depth with drawing several different types of flowers. So if you're interested in learning how to draw flowers more specifically, I've definitely got you covered. So now that I've got my flowers mostly painted in, I'm going in and I'm assessing what I'm doing, and I definitely need some darker notes among the grasses. So I'm using Hooker's Green to kind of paint these leafy frond-like structures. They're pretty simple. It's a line down the center and then you alternate with lines on either side. So really pretty simple. I'm mostly keeping them low, but I am adding a few higher up here and there just to kind of break things up. Now, if you wanted to have more of a composed feel, then you could kind of limit where you add certain elements, and that's going to draw the eye and balance the composition a little bit more. But I'm going for something that's more freeform and a little more fun and a little bit easier for you guys to replicate without having to think too much about it. But if you want to think about it, go for it. I'm absolutely not telling you not to. With my easy watercolor tutorials, whenever you want to kind of take things your own way, put your own spin on things, or if you decide enough is enough and you like how it looks, you are welcome to change things. You are welcome to stop at any point that you're happy with. This is all about teaching you guys some techniques, giving you guys an opportunity to play with your watercolors without having to do too much drawing, just in case drawing isn't one of your strong points, and just trying to make watercolors a little bit more accessible and a little bit more fun. And I've got a lot of watercolor tutorials here on the channel, everything for absolute beginners to more experienced painters, and I myself am a watercolor comic artist and illustrator, so I love watercolors and I really want to help make this an accessible art form for even more people because it's a very affordable way to add color to your work. So once I finished with our Hooker's Green, I'm going in with a much darker green. This might be an undersea green. I might have mixed some phthalo blue in with my Hooker's Green to get a bluer green, but basically I'm working with a darker, cooler green at this point. And I'm doing a little stem, and on each side of the stem, I'm doing like little bitty dots to imply much smaller leaves. And I'm basically just trying to add some depth to the bottom of the illustration while still having a little bit of that peeking out at the top. And you guys can still see a little bit of that blue from our original wash, but it's not so noticeable. This is a great way to kind of, when we're painting grass or we're painting a field of flowers, to kind of transition our sky or our sunlit area into the grass without it being super noticeable. So at this point, you could absolutely be done painting. I'm just going in and kind of assessing what I've painted and adjusting the illustration just to be a little bit more balanced. But like I said earlier, at any point where you're satisfied with the piece, you're happy with the piece, feel free to be done with it and call it good enough. You are the artist and you get to decide when you're finished with your art. So once we've allowed it to dry fully, we can remove our masking tape, pulling away at a 90-degree angle. So if it tears, it doesn't tear into the illustration. Although I have found that of the washi tapes, the MT White washi tape is one of the best for this. I really like this tape. And there we have a beautiful, fairly easy wildflower postcard that you can send to somebody you love. It's got such nice spring and summer vibes. It already feels like a warm day outside, and it makes me super ready for the weather to warm up. I hope you guys found this helpful, useful, and informative. It is my goal to help you guys make art a habit. And I've got lots more watercolor, art, and comic tutorials here on the channel to help get you guys making art. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. It was so much fun hanging out and painting with you guys, and I hope I'll see you guys again soon. If you're new here, it would really mean a lot to me if you took a moment to hit that subscribe button and click the bell notification so that YouTube will let you know when I've got a new tutorial or art supply review for you guys to check out. So have a wonderful day, guys. Happy painting. Bye.